Shalom, and welcome to Light of the Hill Ministries. I'm Yochanan, and today we'll be continuing on the Questions Yeshua Asked series. If you want to follow along, I will be posting this teaching on the first comment box. May we all walk as Yeshua walked. And now, on to the next question in the series. The question Yeshua asked is in the same chapter of Nicodemus, in which he asks in John 3, verse 12, "If you do not believe when I speak to you about earthly matters, how are you going to believe when I speak to you about heavenly matters?" Nicodemus needed a heavenly mindset and a full focus fixed on the things of Yahweh. And the question of Yeshua for all of us is this: if our minds are on earthly matters, how are you going to believe if I tell you heavenly matters? How can we develop a heavenly mindset so that we can understand what he is saying? Colossians 3, 1 through 4 gives us a clue as to how we can do that. If then you were raised with Messiah, seek the matters which are above, where Messiah is seated at the right hand of Elohim. Mind the matters above, not those on the land. For you have not died, and your life has been hidden with Messiah in Elohim. When the Messiah, who is our life, is manifested, then you also shall be manifested with him in esteem. Satan is always attacking believers in order to try and beat them into his will. He does this by placing doubts, fears, and worldly thoughts in them. Satan wants to keep believers focusing on what really matters, and that is Yahweh and his kingdom. In contrast to that, we are taught to keep our minds focused on him and set our hearts on things above. When we pray, we should set Yahweh apart in our hearts and mind, as it says in Matthew 6, verses 9 through 10. This then is the way you should pray. Our Father who is in the heavens, let your name be set apart. Let your kingdom come. Let your desire be done on earth as it is in heaven. This prayer teaches us that our thoughts should always be on him and his desires. In other words, be consumed with loving Yahweh with everything you have. And part of how we do this is by acknowledging that Yahweh is our Father, then setting him apart in our hearts, allowing his kingdom to come. It is then that our desires will be aligned with his on earth as it is in heaven. When we do this, our minds will be toward the right things that Yahweh has for us. And by doing so, he will keep us at peace as we go through trials. As it says in Isaiah 26, verse 3, "The one steadfast in mind you guard in perfect peace, for he trusts in you." The Hebrew word for guard is Strong's number H5341, Natsar, a primitive root to guard, in a good sense, to protect, maintain, obey, etc. Or in a bad sense, or in a bad one, to conceal, etc. In scriptures, those who practice right thinking receive tremendous blessings. When our minds are consumed with Yahweh, our worries and anxiousness will melt away as we begin to learn to trust in him and him alone. This is what is meant by a Yahweh-centered mindset. And Philippians 4, verses 8 through 9 talks about this as it says, "For the rest, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is clean, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good report, If there's any uprightness, and if there's any praise, think on these. Of what you have learned and received and heard and saw in me, practice these, and the Elohim of peace shall be with you. Yahweh is always in our lives. It should be the center of it. Even in the midst of trials and tribulation, He is there, speaking ever so quietly, whispering, as it says in the scriptures. And He said, go out and stand on the mountain before Yahweh. And see Yahweh pass by, and a great and strong wind tearing the mountain and breaking the rocks in pieces before Yahweh. Yahweh was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. Yahweh was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. Yahweh was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. And it came to be when Eliyahu heard it, that he wrapped his face in his robe and went out and stood at the cave opening. And see, a small voice came to him and said, what are you doing here, Eliyahu? 1 Kings 19:11 through 13. What are we doing here? What are we focused on? Are we listening to the still small voice that Yahweh speaks? Or are we too focused on the noise around us? Many are too busy focusing on the wind and the earthquake in their lives to hear, because they do not have the set-apart thinking, which eventually leads to a habit of sin. Paulus, in his letter to the Romans, says, for those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the matters of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, the matters of the Spirit. For the mind of the flesh is death, but the mind of the Spirit is life and peace. Romans 8:5 through 6. We as human beings, or humans, have a tendency to lean on our flesh and live in it, which causes eventual death. We can even seem spiritual on the outside, but in reality, we are fleshly on the inside, demanding that our fleshly needs be met. The problem with that type of spiritual person is what James or Yaakov says in chapter 4, verses 2 through 3 says, you desire and do not have. You murder and are jealous. And you are unable to obtain. You strive and fight and you do not possess, because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask evilly, in order to spend it on your pleasures. We ask evilly because of what's in our hearts, and what's in our hearts haven't been yet impaled with Messiah on the tree. But a person of Yahweh who wants only the desires of Yahweh will want His will to be done on earth and seek it first. This doesn't mean that we don't pray for our needs to be met. It just means that we submit our wills to Yahweh and whatever His will be done in that situation. If we believe that we have been redeemed, then Yahweh will deliver us out of the pit of the enemy tries to keep us in. But if we continue to think on fleshly things, then that will bring the fruit of death, as Paulus says in Romans 8:6. For the mind of the flesh is death, but the mind of the Spirit is life and peace. What does your mind say about you? Are you led by the flesh, or a person who is led by the Spirit? These are questions we all wrestle with and should take it to the Father, and let Him take all our cares on Him, for He does care for us. Right thinking leads to manifesting the peace of Yahweh in our lives. Nicodemus did not have peace in his life, so Yeshua pointed him to a pole with a snake in it. so that he one day would learn that just as the snake on the pole would be lifted up, so too the Son of Elohim would be lifted up and healed. Bring peace of mind and spirit. Like Nicodemus, we too must subject our mind to the tree and render it dead there. It is here that we receive the peace of Yahweh. So how do we receive peace? 1. By focusing on the fact that we have been impaled with Messiah, and we died with him, as it says, I have been impaled with Messiah. I no longer live, but Messiah lives in me. And that which I now live in the flesh, I live by belief in the Son of Elohim, who loved me and gave himself for me. Galatians 2:20. And 2. Keep this daily. Keep doing this daily, and not give the flesh a chance to live as Paulo says he does. I affirm by the boasting in you, which I have in Messiah Yeshua our Master, I die day by day. 1 Corinthians 15:31. We are to imitate Paulus, and he rendered his flesh dead, knowing this, that our old man was impaled with him, so that the body of sin might be rendered powerless to serve no longer. Romans 6:6. And again it says, I speak as a man because of the weakness of your flesh. For even as you did present your members as servants of uncleanness, and of lawlessness resulting in lawlessness, so now present your members as servants of righteousness resulting in set-apartness. Romans 6:19. Dying daily requires us to render our flesh dead, and what is also required of us is that after we realize that the flesh is powerless to do what it formerly once did, now we present ourselves servants of righteousness, being set apart because of Yahushua's righteousness. And 3. After you present yourselves as servants of righteousness, realize that your life is hidden in Messiah right now, as Colossians teaches. If then you were raised with Messiah, seek the matters which are above, where Messiah is, seated at the right hand of Elohim. Mind the matters above, not those on the earth. For you have died, and your life has been hidden with Messiah in Elohim. Colossians 3, verses 1 through 3. This should be a constant daily routine to remind ourselves that we are hidden in him. His love surrounds us every day and shields us from the fiery darts of the evil one. And we have no fear nor shame to be said of us, because Yahushua our Messiah paid the price for our sins. This is why we can rejoice and every day sing his praises, which leads us to look forward to our future with him. And 4. Now that we are hidden in Messiah, we now look forward to our future, and we remind each other every day of it. Because Elohim did not appoint us to wrath, but to obtain deliverance through our Master Yahushua Messiah, who died for us, so that we, whether awake or asleep, should live together with him. Therefore, encourage one another and build up one another as indeed you do. 1 Thessalonians 5, 9 through 11. These are the things we can do to have a heavenly mindset, and if we do this daily, we will bear the fruits of peace in our minds and hearts. We may have troubled times, but we can have peace in the midst of the storms of life. Let us set aside earthly matters and focus on heavenly matters, so that we can understand and walk, and you understand Yeshua and walked as he walked. If you find this teaching a blessing, please be sure to bless others with it by liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. May Yahweh's love, compassion, and shalom be to your home.